Episode 6 and 7 of The Bad Batch. Woo! We had our first, wait, this is our first double episode since the premiere,
Yes,
Mr. Tim
yes.
Costello. And we've got one more coming up. So this is some prime time. And you were telling me right before we started recording, this was the week to do a double episode because
I'll
6
say.
and 7, oh man.
Yeah.
When you were watching these two back to back, what were your first initial thoughts on infiltration and extraction?
Both of them. Infiltration was really good. I really liked that there was a nice progression from the last episode because when Rex and his and Rex is back, everybody. That's great. And Rex and his guys were just saying like, well, Crosshair could be betraying you guys again, and I really liked how Hunter stepped in, so that was cool.
Yes,
And
yes.
both these episodes had a guerrilla warfare kind of style to them, and which I really appreciated. And seeing those Black Ops stormtroopers again was
Yes.
awesome because we've seen them before in seasons past, so it was nice to see. Actually forgotten we had seen them a couple of times
Mm,
before.
yes, yes.
Um, and so it was nice to see them again.
Man, Dee Bradley Baker is just putting in one of the best performances. Like I don't know if I said this on a previous episode. Stop me if I have, Tim. He's like the Andy Serkis of the animated world right now. Like I'm wanting them to create a separate category for him. Like give him his own special award because the amount of voices, not only in this show, in Clone Wars, Bad Batch, all of these things that he's done as a whole have been fantastic. Like his body of work has been amazing. And I first knew him as, hey, he's that guy that does animal noises, like going back to Avatar: The Last Airbender, Appa,
And Phineas and
Momo, like,
Ferb.
oh yeah,
Phineas and Ferb
Phineas and
too.
Ferb.
Yeah.
Like his career is just amazing. And now on Bad Batch, it's like the differences in the clones are so like I would think it's a different actor. Like he's putting in these performances that they have such detail to them and such life to each performance. And this one in particular with the one that they capture at the very beginning and they're going through kind of the not torture, but like questioning him.
Yeah. Clone
And
X.
yeah, he's just like, you're
Mm-hmm.
not gonna get like they're gonna come for you and you're gonna get it. And I'm like, oh man, this is
Yeah.
like another level here.
I mean, I'm sure you have said it before, but I don't care. Because because it bears repeating because Dee Bradley Baker, since the Clone Wars has, even from that first Clone Wars movie, was able to
Right.
make each clone because you had Cody, you had Oddball, and you have Rex here, and throughout the Clone Wars and continuing into Bad Batch and even Rebels, which we'll talk more about here in a sec. Uh, um, and so having him portray all these different characters and making the clones unique characters that
Yes.
we actually care about because they started to do this a little bit in Revenge of the Sith, because that's
Yes.
that's where we first see Cody. We see a
Right.
couple of different clones, and so they started to do that a little bit. But at that point, it's too little, too late. So then, when they got to do it in the Clone Wars, I was very impressed. In so much that I don't want these guys to turn bad, uh, as we know
Right.
they will by the end of the series. So hearing all his different voices was fantastic here.
Yeah. And I gotta say, his performance now to me is like the definitive clones. Whereas when you first start out in Revenge of the Sith, it's all Tamora Morrison.
Yeah, and
And
in Attack of the Clones as well.
yeah, I was like, okay, he's the voice, right? Like
Yeah,
he's the one. And then when they first started with D. Bradley Baker, I'm like, okay, he's kind of doing an impression. He's doing like the New Zealand accent a little bit, but he's really after we spent so much more time with him now than we did with Tamora Morrison as the clones. It's like, oh, now I can't I can't detach that performance anymore. And this just these clones just go to another level. Him doing the Bad Batch has just further solidified it to me.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
said, with
because you get you get to with Crosshair, and Crosshair sounds different than Hunter, and sounds different than Rex, and sounds different than generic clone 25,
right.
and so like I just love the work he's putting into it, and I think we would both be remiss if we didn't mention Kevin Kiner's work on this season,
Yes.
because once again they played Crosshair's theme. I mean, we both talked about how we both watched the Screen Crush YouTube channel,
Hmm.
and they mentioned the music on there a lot, and so in pivotal moments we do see Crosshair's theme. And another thing I liked about these two episodes is it feels like to me that this season has been very Crosshair centric.
Yes.
I don't know if you've picked up on that.
I feel like the Crosshair slash Omega is like the theme that is running at least throughout these first 7 episodes. It's like we're really following them, and they feel like the main characters to the
Yeah,
point where like Hunter and the rest of them, the Bad Batch, are like side characters almost.
yeah,
Just to this point that we've gotten so far, it
yeah,
feels like they are the protagonists. So
yeah,
I have felt that very much. And like I was telling you, this season made me really like him more than I did in the first 2 seasons. First of all, I'm not like a huge sniper guy in a lot
sure,
of my media, a lot of my fiction, like even in my video games that I play, I'm like, I don't like the sniping aspect of being patient and waiting. And I'm like, I gotta run in and shoot. And that's how I kind of feel with the Bad Batch. I gravitated towards the other characters before I
yeah,
gravitated to Crosshair. Now it's almost like flipping where I'm like, oh, I
uh
love
huh,
Crosshair. I want to be the sniper. I want to be Crosshair. And these 2 episodes in particular, seeing him struggling is like almost heartbreaking to me, where I'm like, man, he would be so great if he was the Crosshair that he was in season 1 and 2, where it's just pinpoint precision. He's hitting everything. Now we kind of see with whatever's happening, we still don't know. It has not really been revealed exactly what's happening. I think you were telling me kind of off mic, you're starting to go towards the PTSD route, right? Like
yeah. It
that's what you're starting to think.
because that makes more sense to me. Because at first, because this is Star Wars and this is and with clones, our mind automatically goes to that place of well, maybe the clones are malfunctioning, just because that's the sci-fi space.
Mhm.
That's like when we're in a sci-fi space, that's normally the gun we jump to. No pun intended, of course, uh, or maybe a little bit. Um, but um, but with the PTSD aspect, which I'm still sticking to at this point, makes more sense for Crosshair's character because he's a sniper and he's really struggling not doing those things, and him facing off against these Black Ops stormtroopers who I can't remember what class of stormtrooper they were. Um, looks like you're pulling it up, but
Yeah, I'm trying to look up and see if there's a specific name for them.
yeah,
Um,
but they look, because when you look at stormtroopers and clone troopers, like there's variations, but they look pretty much the same.
right.
These like have like even the Death Troopers from Rogue One, they look like stormtroopers, but they're just black, and got a green visor instead of a black visor, and the rest of them is just black. And but these are just a whole class altogether. So for Crosshair to kind of face uh these guys, is almost facing on what he could have been if he continued on his path, because he was on a path to the Empire. If he hadn't seen in that episode from last season that we love so much, which name is escaping me at this point, but and and if he didn't have that moment of clarity, he would be the one that would be fighting his brothers in this
Right,
instance.
right, right.
So
Yeah, and I guess they're just calling them assassins on everything that I'm pulling up here. Hey, if you know, let us know in the comments down below if there's a specific name for those clone assassins. But
drop us
like
a
you were
line,
saying,
guys.
They have different completely different armor that the helmet almost like Iron Man, the helmet pops up, you
Yeah,
can see their face.
that was cool.
Ha
That was
it
cool.
has that, like, like, I don't even know what that's called, but being able to breathe decompression, like, being able to breathe in
Yeah,
space and stuff like that,
yeah.
harkens back to, like, the original Ralph McQuarrie designs for
Mhm.
stormtroopers and Darth Vader. It
Yeah.
was okay to be able to breathe in space. That's why they're wearing these helmets, and I think it just goes back to that. Which that's what I really love about what Dave Filoni did on a lot of the earlier animated shows was using those Ralph McQuarrie designs
I was just about
that
to say
went
that, yeah.
unused for so many years, going back to the 70s and 80s, and it was like, man, it's crazy how many ideas that he had that just did not get used, and
Yeah.
being able to just bring all those back and like they were new, fresh ideas. That
Mhm.
was a great way to pay tribute to the past, and then also to just be Star Wars, like to remain faithful to the source material. I love a lot of that stuff. So that's really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
just going and off of that,
mhm.
the Darth Vader that we saw in Rebels was based off of that art. It wasn't,
Yes, that's right.
it
Yeah, the thin
wasn't.
lightsaber. Yeah.
Yeah, thin
Yeah.
lightsaber, like even the mask looked like that
Yes.
old art,
Right.
and to see that again in that space was cool because they could have just gone with, like, oh, well, we have a visual reference for Darth Vader in the original trilogy, so we'll just use that. But they
Right.
went back to this old artwork, and and I bring up Rebels because we saw Wolf
Yeah.
back this week. It's nice to kind of see, like, as we also saw Wolf, we've seen Gregor, and we know where they end up in Rebels, Rex, Wolf, and Gregor. So to see those guys again, it's almost like they're letting us know, like, we haven't forgotten about these guys, and we know that that where they end up, and they're kind of setting that up. And so I really appreciated that. Like, there's like the season is just like so many final seasons of television shows like often don't feel like a final season until like almost the end. But I like that we have this kind of atmosphere of a final season permeating throughout the series.
Right.
uh
This
and
feels like the finale right now.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They're
Yes.
definitely setting us up for that. And going back to, because we haven't talked about Omega yet, and I really like that she's mimicking Crosshair.
Oh, yes. Yeah. She got the
Yeah,
toothpick.
she
Yeah.
got the toothpick. She's all sitting up like that.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Really,
Yes.
really loved that touch.
Yes.
But she reveals to everybody that she has an M count, and everyone's just like, well, what the heck is that? Because
Which is That's really interesting because we as an audience, have been following this since the prequels, and we've always talked about midi-chlorians. It's been somewhat, infamous in Star Wars because a lot of people don't like that idea. But I actually wanted to ask you real quick. First of all, do you like midi-chlorians? And first of all, do you like midi-chlorians as a concept of
as a
explaining the
concept,
Force?
it's a concept I don't mind explaining the Force, because I am a and this is goes to my fantasy reading background. I There's a thing in fantasy that's called the magic system. And the magic system is like basically it's part of the world building. The best example I can point to a really good magic system is Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's
Hmm.
a very
Yeah.
hard magic system. There are specific rules. There are specific things. I like those kind of magic systems. Those are called hard magic systems. And so I prefer explanations because I want to know how things work
Mm,
in the world that I'm in. And if it's
right.
just like, well, it's just magic, that's just Harry, and that's where we get to light magic system, which is Harry Potter. It's just like, well, how did this happen? Well, it's magic. That's how it works. Uh,
Yeah. Okay.
um,
Well,
and so
so I guess
I like
do
M
you
count. I
like
like the
them
idea.
kind of it's almost like trying to have your cake and eat it too of M count instead of actually saying midi chlorians. We're gonna call it M count. It's different, guys. Don't focus on the midi chlorians. These are M count. We
Well,
all know as Star Wars fans,
yeah, exactly.
but do you
Midi
like
chlorian
them
midi
kind of
chlorian
referring to
count.
it as M count?
Yeah, it rolls off the tongue better. It rolls off the
Yeah.
tongue better.
Okay. Gotcha.
Midi-chlorian count is a lot to digest when you're
Right.
saying it,
Right.
especially when they're saying it all the time
Right.
now in
Right.
in the season. Uh,
Hmm.
M count just is better, and it
Okay.
seems like a more scientific term, which
Gotcha.
which jives with Star Wars, I think, a little better.
Okay. And as we were talking, I pulled up Wikipedia, and it looks like they're just called Clone Assassins, Clone X Troopers, or CX Troopers. That's kind
Okay.
of the current term. I guess maybe just haven't been named yet up to this point. So Clone Assassin is who we're talking about, but you can see right there kind of the different art or the different armor that
Yeah.
appears on there. So CX1, CX2. I guess those are the designations. So interesting. We're adding
So
to our vocabulary.
yeah. So now that Omega has dropped the M count thing, uh, which brings us to the end of this episode, the end of the
Yes.
second episode, and basically I think it's Rex that tells Hunter, like, you better figure out what that means if you want to keep her safe.
I
And
like that. Yes.
yeah, and yeah,
I really did enjoy that. Kind
yeah,
of
and at the
getting our guys involved and almost, hey, you need to get to where we're at as an audience.
hmm yeah, like you need
So
to figure out what this means. And I'm just getting chills
yes.
just thinking about that last line of the episode because it was really great. I mean, it's just really great bunch
Yeah.
of episodes. I really love seeing Rex back. Love seeing all those guys. Love seeing Dave Filoni putting in his wolf stuff because he loves wolves. So that was
And
cool.
that's also like it's interesting because we saw them in Rebels. We saw like what happens to Rex, Wolf, Gregor. Like we know that they're going to survive. We know that there's going to be something that happens, but we also don't know exactly what happens in between that time. To I think Screen Crush was kind of thinking about maybe there's some type of torture that goes on, maybe they get captured, and
Right.
that's why there's that PTSD almost in their performance in Rebels. So it's
Yeah,
gonna be
because
interesting.
in
But I
because in Rebels they're still too many cut you off, but in Rebels they're kind of like at least Wolf and Gregor are kind of like a little eccentric.
yes,
So I wonder
yes,
what leads to that breaking point for them.
right,
So it'll be
right,
interesting to see what happens with them.
yeah.
And
But that
I really liked. Sorry, uh,
oh no,
lots to say. I really liked Wolf saying in these episodes when he sees Rex, "I thought you were dead."
hmm,
And that brings us back to the series finale of Clone Wars, where Ahsoka and Rex were driving that ship into the planet, and there was that basically that grave that
right,
grave
right,
of clone troopers,
yeah,
and obviously Wolf and Gregor would have stumbled onto that and they would have seen Rex's helmet. Apparently, he has a replacement. So,
yeah,
um,
yeah. That is very interesting. It's all kind of like tying in together, and this Filoniverse and all of this animated stuff, it's gonna really I think when it's all said and done, everything is gonna fit nicely together. There's not gonna be like gaps or hey, what happened in this time period? But I think to me, that finale, that confrontation between the two sides of Wolf's side and Hunter's side, like these are your brothers. These are your clone. Like these are clones that they thought, we're going rogue, or they thought this is who our mission is. And seeing Gregor kind of, or sorry, seeing Wolf kind of the wheels turning for him, and like he's starting to become, wait a minute, maybe you need to be thinking like a thinking clone of you're not just following, you're not just good soldiers follow orders. And that's
right,
what I think is another kind of through line throughout this whole series of
free
good
will.
soldiers follow orders to free will, and
Yeah.
we're seeing that number one with Crosshair, and then specifically now that the thought process turning. I like that of Wolf saying like, oh wait a minute, maybe there is something, like Hunter being like, hey, think about it. Why do you think this is happening? Like this is, why do you think they sent you after a kid? Like,
A
oh
child.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you're being ordered, and Hunter puts it in perspective for them. You're being ordered to kill a child,
Yes.
And I really liked that kind, like Wolf hasn't fully made the transition into where the Bad Batch are right now, but he's getting there because
Yes.
he does give them a head start. And so, yeah, these episodes.
Yeah. Top
Uh,
notch. And
I did have a question though.
yes.
So you mentioned the Filoniverse, and
Uh-huh.
so a big complaint right now with Marvel content is that there's just too many shows, there's too many movies. But what I've liked about Star Wars, with the animation, with the Disney Plus series, they've really managed to like compartmentalize everything, where it
Mm.
doesn't feel like there's still that same interconnectivity as there is with the MCU versus the Star Wars universe, but it doesn't feel as, what's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't feel as overwhelming.
Mm.
Have you noticed that with the Star Wars versus Marvel, or am I just crazy?
I didn't specifically notice that because I also am probably not the best person to ask because
Sure.
even for me, the MCU is nothing compared to comic books. Like
Oh
the
yeah,
Marvel
absolutely.
comics of how many like six 60 years of Marvel comics,
Sure.
I guess I've been conditioned that
Right.
this is not overwhelming for me, but I can see from the casual viewer's standpoint. I think you and I both read way more comics than like the normal average viewer
Yeah.
of the MCU. And I think with Star Wars, I can see that being less of a burden to someone to be like, okay, I'm just going to follow this set of shows or these just the Filoniverse itself, or even if you're tying in, like the live action stuff to the animated stuff. I can see Star Wars being less of like homework almost. Even though at this point now, if you think about how many episodes have been in the Clone Wars specifically,
Hmm.
versus Rebels and Bad Batch being a lot less, it is a little bit of a slog to be like to recommend Clone Wars to somebody right now in 2024 if you've never watched Clone Wars before. I put out a short that was like, is it worth it? That Men in Black scene, like, is it worth it? Yeah, if you're strong enough. And it was like the Rebels and the Clone
Yeah.
Wars in the background. So yeah, I can see that for Star Wars kind of feeling less encumbered to be like, oh, I have to watch this, like almost that burden of all this stuff.
Sure.
But for me, I love having that burden. I love watching all this stuff. I love talking about it. That's
Hmm.
why we're doing this podcast.
Sure.
So I'm the wrong guy to ask. But who might be a good person to ask is the viewer, the person who's watching this right now. That's a great question that Tim just put forward. I'm sure if you're watching this Star Wars content, if you're watching The Bad Batch, then you're probably a Marvel fan. Everything's under the Disney umbrella now. You're
Sure.
probably watching a lot of this stuff and seeing it unfold. So, do you feel like the Star Wars stuff is easier to get into right now than the MCU? I'm interested to know. Tim is interested to know. So, leave a comment down below. We always enjoy hearing from all of the listeners out there. All of the feedback is great. If you're a fan of this content, if you're a fan of the Bad Batch, don't forget to check out all of our previous episodes where we've been talking Bad Batch. Tim and I have been having a great time here
Absolutely.
talking about
Yeah.
season 3, and we've got one more set of double episodes coming in April. That's the first week of April, actually, and then May the 1st. That's the last week of the Bad Batch. So we still got a few more to go, but we are loving it so far. Bad Batch has been some great material, and as I always say, anytime, we would be honored if you would join us here again.